Have you ever given someone advice, and then, like way later, you have this moment where you realize you were the one who needed to hear it the most? Well, today we're diving into a really powerful personal story from writer Okpemhan Osuchio about that exact feeling. It's a fantastic reflection on integrity and how the messages we think are for other people can end up being a mirror for ourselves.
Okay, so let's start with this core idea. Osuchio was taught this principle early on, and it's pretty foundational. The whole point is that any message you share, whether it's teaching, or a piece of advice, or some kind of inspiration, it has to land with you first. Before you get up on any stage, literal or not, the first person you have to convince is yourself.
But, as great as that sounds in theory, there's often this huge gap between the principle and how we actually act. So let's explore that tension for a minute.
And isn't this just the most human thing ever? When we hear a tough message, our first instinct is often to kind of look around the room and think, oh man, I really hope so-and-so is listening to this. It's so easy to think the lesson is for someone else, and we just conveniently let ourselves off the hook.
So this brings us to Osuchio's own story. For years, he had this habit of recording his sermons, but he's very upfront that his reason for doing it, well, it wasn't exactly humble.
I really love the honesty here. As you can see, he basically admits his goal was pure vanity. He just wanted to listen back and hear how powerful and eloquent he sounded. But this habit, which started from a place of ego, actually led him to something completely unexpected and frankly transformative.
And this is where the story gets really interesting. What started out as this routine of self-admiration slowly started to change into something else entirely as he listened to those recordings over and over. Can you imagine that? He's just listening to his own voice, the one he knows so well. But then he starts to hear something more. A quiet but totally unmistakable second voice speaking through his own words. This wasn't about critiquing his speaking style anymore. Something way more profound was happening in the playback. So, this brings us to the absolute climax of his reflection. That mysterious voice he kept hearing? It connects directly to one of the most famous and intense confrontations in the entire Bible.
So, for a little context, the prophet Nathan tells King David this story about a rich guy who steals a poor man's only beloved lamb. David gets furious, filled with this righteous anger, and says the rich man deserves to die, completely missing that the story is a metaphor for his own sin, and it's right at that moment that Nathan drops the hammer with his accusation.
So, as Osuchio listened to his own sermons he had written and delivered for other people, what was this quiet, second voice saying back to him? What was the personal message cutting right through his own eloquence?
And there it is. The voice was echoing those famous words from Nathan to David, "Thou art the man." Through his own recordings, Osuchio was being confronted by the very truths he was preaching. The sermon was being turned right back on the speaker. He was the man in the story.
Wow, what do you even do with a revelation like that? For Osuchio, it taught him this absolutely vital lesson about the huge danger of becoming immune to the very messages you're sharing with the world. You see, he explains that when a message comes from your own life, it's incredibly powerful. It becomes a real, living testimony. But there's a dangerous flip side. If you ignore the personal warning or the lesson in it for yourself, it's a problem. You basically become a signpost pointing down a road you refuse to walk on.
So, out of all this, Osuchio gives us a really simple but profound practice for anyone who leads, or teaches, or just gives advice. It's just 3 steps. Record your message. Then listen back, not to judge your performance, but to listen for personal conviction. And finally, and this is the most important part, actually heed that quiet voice that might be speaking directly to you.
This quote just wraps the whole thing up perfectly, doesn't it? In the heat of the moment, it's so easy to think a message is for everybody else. But later, in the quiet of the playback, we might just hear that gentle but firm reminder that, no, this one was for us all along. And that leaves us with a pretty big challenge. Because yeah, this story is about a preacher, but this lesson is for every single one of us. The next time you give a friend advice, or you lead a team meeting, or even when you're teaching your kid a lesson, just pause for a second and ask yourself, what part of this message is actually for me? What are you hearing in your own playback?